be there? Why would a man be there? No, it's actually pissing me off. Oh my God, it pisses me off. Why would a man be there? Why do you want to be there? Like,
when you go to a Gen Z club, someone please teach them how to dance.
You know, black people. No.
lately, my For You page has been full of people that are complaining about the club and how culture around going out just isn't the same as it used to be, and no one's really dancing. Everyone's kind of on their phones and the vibes is just feeling a little bit off. And now we see guys that are dancing at the DJ booth and people are filming instead of moving. Half the crowd is just standing around. So I decided to look into why that is. I'm not one to romanticize the past. I know everything has its problems, but with how party culture is changing, I'm starting to see a lot of people, particularly millennials, start to become very nostalgic about the past. For the past few decades, people were used to the club being more so about the overpriced drinks, the loud music, being able to dance with people in close confinement, and just having a good time, relatively phone-free for a few hours. But lately, as we're starting to see, things are starting to change, and in cities like New York, Chicago, and London, there's a lot of different kind of parties that are starting to emerge. And believe it or not, nowadays on a Saturday, you could go to a cafe or a yoga studio and there will be a party that is happening. You'll see people dancing, they're totally sober, there's a DJ, there's coffee, sunlight, and people seem to be having a really good time. I'm seeing this on TikTok especially. And this is just the new type of partying that we're starting to see emerge, and it's called soft clubbing. And to me, it's showing that nightlife isn't necessarily dying. It's more so that it's evolving, and that old idea of being young, meaning that you have to party and stay out and drink way too much, is slowly starting to fade away. And Gen Z especially is approaching nightlife with this completely different mindset, especially when you compare them to millennials or Gen X. So today, let's talk about this shift in club culture and what it says about us. What's up, YouTube? I'm tinysey. If you are returning, thank you so much for coming back. And if you're new, I hope you like it here. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. Let's take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, Heyday. Heyday is a super cozy farming lifestyle simulator where you can build and design your own farm from the ground up, and I've been having so much fun tending to my farm from the comfort of my home, and I love me a good cozy game. What I like about Heyday is how relaxing it feels when I'm playing. With real life sometimes being stressful, Heyday is a nice break from the chaos because everything runs on your time. You can harvest crops, bake pies, care for your animals. I like my chickens the most. And you can also trade with neighbors all at your own pace. They did a great job of capturing the fun parts of running a farm without any of the real life work. So if you're looking for a peaceful little escape between all the chaos that life can bring, download Heyday for free on iOS and Android using the link in my description or the pinned comment. And I'm also hosting a giveaway. If you download the game using my link and comment your farm name under my pinned comment, you could win a $50 prize. I'm looking to see some clever farm names. And thank you to our sponsor, Heyday. Before disco took over, most nightlife, especially between the 1930s and early 1960s, was built around drinking. And after Prohibition ended, bars and supper clubs became the main places that people went out at night. And alcohol wasn't just part of the fun, it was literally the main attraction. Music was more of a background noise to keep people around longer, buy more drinks, and socialize. And dancing was happening, but it wasn't necessarily the main event from what I was able to see. But then, as the 1960s came to an end, people were ready to introduce more than just drinking as the main event. And so the counterculture movements that were also happening at the same time had pushed social boundaries, technology was starting to evolve, and recorded music was becoming a lot easier to play and mix. And so recorded music specifically was a huge game changer for nightlife because it gave clubs a lot more control and flexibility than live performances ever really were able to. Instead of having to rely on a live band that has to take breaks or even have these fixed sets, DJs could continuously mix for hours. But also you could get a sense of how people were actually feeling about the music in real time. Funk and soul had also been shifting the sound of music to something that was a little more rhythm driven. So this was something people actually wanted to move their body to. And this shift made nightlife feel more immersive and communal. And this is what paved the way for the disco era. And this was probably one of the biggest shifts in nightlife culture. And that's because it created spaces that were a lot more liberating and inclusive, especially for queer and marginalized communities. You would see a lot more movement and rhythm, and people were actually dancing the night away. These people did not play. They were sweating. They were having a good time. And you could tell it was really centered on the music and dancing. It seemed as though connection mattered more than what you were drinking, although they were most definitely doing that and probably drugs too. But by the 1980s and 90s, DJs became a lot more important in whether people were going to come back to your club or not. And this is something that we still see today. If your DJ sucks, people are not coming back to your club. DJs weren't just pressing play. They were actually trying to curate your experience in real time and react to the crowd. They're pretty much live testing art, and they would play unreleased tracks to see how their audience would react to them. And this was also a way singers could test their new songs, like the first rendition of an album release party. And in comparison to the 1930s, clubbing started to feel a lot more creative and even chaotic. Then we had the shift to the 2000s, and that's where we probably started to lose the plot. We started to see things like bottle service, VIP sections, and celebrity sightings that turned nightlife into this huge spectacle that it still is. I will say that the 2000s is a mixed bag. I mean, you see that there are still places that care about their DJs and playing good music. I still see great DJ sets. I still see clubs where people are dancing, but we kind of lost that being the main essence of why people are going there. And now a lot of clubs are making a bulk of their money on alcohol sales and how many people are renting out sections. But with social media, we could see how the 2000s became a lot less about dancing and became more about the wealthy experience or the luxury experience that you could have. But we are starting to see the end of this version of clubbing, and perhaps we are entering a new era because from what we hear on social media, people are over this version of clubbing and nightlife. Before we talk about where nightlife is actually headed, we have to talk about what's actually not working right now in a little bit more detail. The first thing that I've been hearing quite frequently on social media is that whole like men on platforms thing. I keep seeing videos about this new phenomenon, if you could even call it that. A TikTok creator named Tegan posted about the epidemic of men being on the platforms in the club, and that video blew up. And to me, it seems like it's not really about the guys dancing on the platforms themselves. It's about that shift we're seeing in the energy within these clubs. I guess these stages used to be where women wanted to dance and they would be dancing there. And now there's this weird tension because people don't know what the unspoken rules are anymore. And I'm not really saying who should or shouldn't dance where, because I think if men want to dance on the platforms, they could dance on the platforms. I just think that this complaint in general is very interesting, and I'm seeing it pretty widespread. It points to the bigger evolution that's showing us that the old social norms that used to guide club behavior is kind of falling apart, and nobody knows how to act in these spaces anymore. And that leads to the even bigger problem that people have been complaining about, that nobody's actually dancing in the clubs anymore. And disclaimer, I don't really go clubbing in my area, so a lot of this is based on research, based on social media, based on what people have told me. I am more likely to go to the club when I'm actually not in my area. So recently I went to Mexico City and I went to the club there, and people were dancing. Let me tell you, they were like, there was a dance circle, dance competition, or not dance competition. People formed a circle and there was a dance battle going on. But a lot of those problems that people talk about are still the case. There's a lot of people like on the outer edge of the dance floor, just standing there, just like literally just standing there and watching the dance floor. So while there were people dancing, while there was a dance battle happening, that was a tiny portion of the club where that was happening. And the majority of the club was people standing around, drinking and watching people have fun. All that to say, I'm not really one to speak on club culture in America. So a lot of this is from what I see on social media, articles, and from what people are saying to me firsthand. And this is also not the case in all circumstances or all clubs. Again, I've seen a lot of videos where people are dancing, where the DJ is doing amazing and there aren't people on their phones. So to each its own, but I think there is a consensus around what's happening in a lot of these clubs. So one of the things that I hear a lot is that people are just standing there. They're leaning on the walls, they're checking their phones, but the dancing that you used to see in the 70s and 80s or even the early 2000s is just not really happening as much. And the club still has that same chaotic vibe, but people aren't reacting the same way to it anymore, and the crowds aren't really giving what they used to give. We're also seeing that sometimes they're just recording themselves or even recording the people around them. Recording is making people feel so much more anxious, especially Gen Z. There's this feeling that everybody is waiting for somebody else to move first, and there's a fear of being recorded or ending up in the background of somebody else's story.
Like, nobody dances, so boring, blah, blah, blah. It's because when people do dance, you guys film them and put it on TikTok. Cut that shit out.
And Halloween has recently passed, and I've been seeing so many videos of Loraxes dancing like very enthusiastically. And it's always the case that there's like this circle formed around them and everyone's watching them dance and have a whole bunch of fun. And I guess what stands out to me when I see these videos is that why is this person dancing and actually having fun causing a circle to form and for people to just spectate them rather than joining in the fun? Personally, that would deter me from wanting to dance, because it's like, so if I start dancing like I really mean it, everyone's just going to watch me. It probably deters people from actually having fun, because then all of a sudden you become what everyone wants to watch and everyone wants to record. And I think this culture has replaced the carefree energy that dancing used to bring, and people want to let loose, but the second that somebody does, you're going to pull out your phone. So the spell breaks. As soon as you're about to be recorded, it makes you start to think about how you look or how others might be judging you, and suddenly no one really wants to be the first one to dance. Some clubs are even finding ways to prevent the recording from actually happening. Fabric in London and Berghain in Berlin introduced phone policies. So now they have camera stickers, they have designated phone-free zones, and this is all in an attempt to remove or alleviate people's anxieties around being recorded in the club. I've seen that this conversation has been going on since at least last year, and people keep talking about how it feels off in the club. And the consensus wasn't that Gen Z hates fun. It's that clubs make it almost impossible to actually have any fun. People are simultaneously vying for attention and also trying not to be seen at the same time, which brings me to the whole bottle service and section culture. And the fact that it's even become a culture says enough. Bottle service and private sections have turned nightlife into this whole display of status rather than the shared experience that it used to be. In big cities, especially like New York and Miami, research from the nightlife industry will show you that bottle service accounts for a majority of club revenue. And in some high-end venues, more than 70% of profits come from VIP tables and champagne packages. People even become competitive about buying bottles in order to show off, and celebrities definitely have helped shape this sort of culture, because once celebrities started to show up at these high-end clubs in the late 90s and early 2000s, bottle service and private sections became a lot more popular. When people would see stars like Paris Hilton and Diddy and Britney Spears popping their bottles in the VIP section, that made it seem a lot more exclusive and aspirational. And so of course other people also wanted to be seen in the same kinds of spaces as the rich and famous. And now that's led to a culture where some people don't even want to go out unless they have a section reserved. And if you are going for a night out, now that sort of means being seen spending a lot of money and not really dancing. And that shift has made nightlife feel a lot more exclusive and transactional and ostentatious. I've also seen a lot of complaints about the music that people play in clubs, specifically what's happening to DJs. It used to be that being a DJ meant curating the vibe of the whole club. Maybe you introduce new music to the crowd, to sounds that they've never heard before. In some ways, they were the gatekeepers of certain subcultures, bridging underground music with mainstream appeal. Now, the DJ scene is a lot different thanks to streaming and social media. Because of these things, everyone is able to be a DJ, which which is great in theory, but has also diluted the craft. Studies from music and cultural researchers show that there is this accessibility of DJ technology like the controller and the premixed playlist, and that's lowered the technical barrier, which is what's letting so many people get into DJing. And we're also seeing how algorithm-driven music culture has made sets seem a lot more predictable, and instead of people digging for those rare tracks or building the tension through mixing a lot of different songs, DJs are just playing what's already trending online. So clubs are all starting to sound the same everywhere that you go. But that isn't to say that there aren't any experimental DJs out there. I like listening to DJ sets on YouTube, and I've heard a lot of cool mixes, but I guess in the wild, people aren't really experiencing this. It could be the DJs, but it could be us. Maybe that's just what we're reacting to. Maybe we don't like experimental anymore. Who knows? Either way, something that used to be essential in that DJ culture is slowly fading away. And a lot of these things that people are noting are changing the club from what we knew before. When you look at the data, that's also showing that something is definitely shifting. And a Newsweek survey found that only 25% of Gen Z is still interested in clubbing. Yeah, only 25%. But that doesn't mean that they don't want to go out or dance or even socialize with each other. It just means that they don't want to do it in the format that is available anymore. In the UK, 61% of young people said that they go out less than they did the year before. The biggest reason was cost and safety, because going out to traditional clubs is extremely expensive. You have the entry fees, the $25 cocktails, ride shares, the late night food. The whole experience just costs a lot of money. If your rent is taking up nearly half of your paycheck, then dropping over $100 on a night out feels less like fun and more like a poor financial decision. And that's kind of where some things start to connect. The financial pressure, the safety concerns, and the social exhaustion of nightlife are all feeding into the same realization that maybe drinking all night in the crowded club just isn't worth it like it was before. And for a lot of young people, that's leading to the rejection of the whole alcohol-centered model of fun. And we also see that the drinking rates among young adults have been dropping since the early 2000s. But it isn't just about all the financial pressures, safety concerns, or even the rise of wellness culture. It's about the shifting priorities that Gen Z has. The idea that alcohol has to be the ticket to connection just doesn't really resonate with them anymore, and the rules are starting to change amongst their communities. Of course, nightlife isn't disappearing, it's just transforming to something that fits them a lot better. The daytime coffee shop dance parties are taking off for a reason. The events usually wrap up before sunset. You can have a latte instead of a cocktail, and the chaos that you usually find in a club is not really there. It's more so about the community. I guess people are trying to strip nightlife down to its essentials. So it's more about the music and dancing and hanging out, which is what Gen Z's been craving for such a long time with the loss of third spaces. With club culture slowly crashing and burning, we're seeing that Gen Z is finding a new way to have fun, and in my opinion, I think it's pretty creative. As I mentioned earlier in this video, soft clubbing and daytime dance parties are starting to become a huge thing, and when I've watched those DJ sets on YouTube, I've always wondered where these things are happening. So you'll see coffee shops turn into these dance spaces in the afternoon, then they'll have brunches that end with DJ sets, and there's even events that wrap up by 7 p.m. And for people that have demanding jobs or health conditions, or even just a preference for not being exhausted the next day, this kind of partying probably feels a lot more fun. You get to enjoy the music and be part of community without sacrificing your sleep or even your bank account. At least it tends to be cheaper because they're serving coffee, which is safer and a lot more accessible. And personally, it seems like an upgrade to the nightlife model that we have right now. I've also seen that instead of just going to the club, people are also choosing these very highly curated experiences. So this might look like a silent disco where you can switch between different DJ channels. There's immersive theater that mixes performance and music together. There's theme parties that are built around specific aesthetics or communities. Like when Bridgerton came out, there were a lot of dinner parties that were centered around the theme of Bridgerton. Of course, these events are usually a lot smaller and they're usually more expensive, but I think that's a trade-off for a curated and well thought out event. Alcohol-free nightlife is also growing pretty fast along alongside Gen Z's broader move away from heavy drinking. And for millennials, alcohol was often seen as an essential part of having fun. It was kind of the center of every social event that they would go to. I saw a video where someone was saying it's customary to have 21 shots on your 21st birthday and actually live to tell the tale.
People are like, Gen Z are drinking less than millennials did. Can you imagine if they found a way to drink more than us? If Gen Z found a way to outdrink the Four Loko generation, we would actually probably have problems. Remember, for our 21st birthdays, it was customary to take 21 shots and live to tell the tale.
The idea of ordering 21 shots might have been something to brag about at a certain point, but now I guess people just find that exhausting. And with this shift, we're starting to see things like sober raves and mocktail bars, so the market is also shifting towards these new needs that are starting to pop up. So it's not about avoiding the fun, it's about redefining what fun actually looks like to them, because it's not going to be the same as it was for previous generations. There's also been a huge shift towards smaller scale socializing, so things like house parties, dinner parties, game nights. And this is kind of what I was used to in my college days. The club was a thing, but no one really was going there like that. There were a lot of house parties, there were a lot of kickbacks, and those were definitely smaller scale. Of course, it was still a party, but you're not in a club setting. Having these types of small events also give people a chance to actually talk and be in community with each other. But this shift does come with its trade-offs. Historically, nightlife has been a vital third space, especially for marginalized groups. It was a space where you could meet people outside of your usual circle, and as nightlife moves into private spaces, that openness risks fading away. But it is showing that there's a desire for genuine connection over the club, where everything is just becoming over the top and becoming a show-off game. And I think some of the most exciting stuff, at least in my opinion, is happening in venues that don't really fit the traditional categories. So art galleries that have DJs, bookstores that host dance nights, yoga studios with dance sessions. I've even gone to a museum that had an after-hour party. And they're calling these hybrid spaces because they're blurring the line between art, wellness, and social life. So it's less about it being a club and it's more about making dancing and music part of your everyday life and culture. And finally, there's the rise of micro scenes. So similar to in the 80s and 90s, we're seeing the resurgence of underground raves. We're even seeing events that are built around nostalgia and specific decades or vibes. So if you think like a Y2K type of party. Overall, these types of events are smaller and harder to find, but they are apparently out there. It seems like the future of nightlife isn't going to be such a big party anymore, but rather like a bunch of tiny small ones. But the plus side is there's a party for everybody. Every cultural shift involves some sort of trade-off, so what are we going to be losing as traditional clubbing starts to disappear? I think at its best, traditional clubs would offer genuine escape, and it was distinctly set apart from ordinary life where different rules obviously will apply. Especially back in the day, it was the first place where people were able to experiment with their identity or their sexuality. Looking back at the disco era in particular, that's where gay liberation was able to take root, and queer communities were able to create spaces where they were able to be themselves and actually have fun, especially during a time where they weren't always accepted and treated with respect. And because of that, the disco era helped fuel a lot more visibility and activism. And with rave culture in the 80s and 90s, we also saw a lot of multiculturalism. In the UK in particular, early rave scenes started from the working class as well as Black communities, and they would blend a lot of different influences from reggae to sound system culture, Chicago house, Detroit techno, and this would create the new rave sound that they had. And because of this diverse mix, rave culture became a space where people from completely different places and backgrounds would be able to connect and meet each other in this shared space. So there were a lot of movements that were able to take root and grow from these spaces because it was accessibility, which is a huge factor and I guess a huge plus. Clubs are public, so you don't always need an invitation. You just know if I go to this club and pay the cover, I'll be able to get in. If traditional venues do start to disappear and we don't create equally accessible alternatives, then a lot of people are going to lose that space where they can learn about themselves and they don't need to know somebody to get in. So as nightlife fragments into these more niche communities, we are losing some of these things that we had before. And that isn't to say we aren't gaining things as well, because of course we are. The new party culture seems to be more inclusive for people who don't drink, who have disabilities, that made more traditional traditional clubs uncomfortable, and also for those who couldn't really afford to go out to these ostentatious places. There's more room for people to find experiences that actually are working for them. And of course, some of this seems to be a lot more healthy physically and mentally, because now people are drinking a lot less and there's non-alcoholic parties and people are just being more intentional with socializing. I feel like going out isn't going to be such a default for Gen Z or even Gen Alpha as like a part of growing up or becoming an adult. And I think that's because there'll be way more options. Of course, we don't know what's going to stick quite yet, but the uncertainty is also part of the fun because people are just going to keep throwing things at the wall until we find something. I usually see the conversation end after people talk about what's wrong with club culture, but it's not that Gen Z is boring or risk averse or even too glued to their phones to have any fun. I think it's that they've looked at what's to offer and they're just like, it's too expensive, it's overhyped, and I'm not into it. I don't think traditional clubs are going anywhere, but they'll just be an option that exists among a lot of other options. I also think the physical venues that do survive will have to be a lot more flexible because in this economy, you can't just be one thing. You're gonna have to repurpose your space to serve a lot of different functions. Technology will also continue to shape the world around us for better or for worse. And on one hand, these tools make it so much easier to find events and to build the communities and to create a lot of these immersive experiences, but also that constant presence of the cameras and social media keeps people self-conscious and anxious when they are in a lot of these spaces. But the biggest change might be in how we even view the concept of going out. I think in the future, the line between nightlife and regular life is going to start to fade a little bit more, especially as we see work schedules being more flexible, remote jobs, and social media keeping everybody connected around the clock. The boundaries that used to be in place because technology wasn't as advanced are starting to fade away. So if we're seeing work life and leisure already start to blend together, then the natural progression is music and dance and community also starting to eventually blend together. I think nightlife always was about the shared experience of dancing and music and drinking, all of it, but the way people seek these things are starting to shift. So instead of forcing themselves into the same late night alcohol-fueled environments, more people are going to choose experiences that actually feel intentional, safe, and authentic to who they are and what they prefer. So no, I don't think Gen Z is killing nightlife. I think they're just finding their own way of doing it. And it's the beginning of a new era, if you will. So that's all I have for you. What do you all think about these new spaces that are popping up? And do you like the old version of clubbing, or would you find yourself at one of these coffee shop dance parties? But before we wrap up, don't forget to check out Heyday. It's free to download on iOS and Android, and you can use my link in the description or the pinned comment to start building your dream farm today. If you made it this far in the video, please comment the coffee cup emoji. Feel free to check out my other videos. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.